Hello and welcome everybody to our September Coffee of the Month live stream. So I will go ahead and wait for people to get in here and let you guys confirm that the audio sounds good on your end. I know it also takes a couple of seconds for it to actually start for most people, so I'll wait on that. I think we should be good to go here. Perfect. Yeah, it looks like we're ready. All right, so can somebody confirm the audio on their end? Just want to make sure the audio sounds good. Perfect. All right. So we are ready to start. So what we're going to be doing here today is we're going to be figuring out our September Coffee of the Month coffees. So I put out a question on the poll yesterday on our Instagram to figure out which coffees we were going to include. So some ideas and suggestions from people. I'm going to go through those, and I'm also going to respond to any comments that we receive as well. So we will go ahead and get started at the very beginning. And the very first one we have comes from Carl B. Likes Coffee, and he suggested September. So let's go ahead and start by looking at September's coffees. It's here. Right. And there we go. Perfect. Let's go ahead and take a look at September. And as always, we are going to be drinking something with this one. So today I have brewed the Hurtume, is a wash processed Ethiopian coffee from Terraform out of Shanghai, China. So we are going to be reviewing some coffees from them here in the near future. But this sample was given to us by Airworks Coffee yesterday. So I'm kind of curious about it. I've heard from Airworks that this is the best coffee that they had from their Terraform release. That's the one they received the most positive feedback on. So I'm kind of curious about it. So we'll go ahead and take the first sip now. Still a little hot. But let's go ahead and take a look at what September is currently offering. So we'll take a look at all of their filter offerings for now. And I do keep pretty good track of what September is releasing as well. So I usually have a good idea of what they're offering. And I haven't taken a look, I would say, recently, mostly because we are reviewing some September coffees. So I wanted to take a quick break from them. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they have. So I probably want to avoid Colombian coffees in general, at least for the time being. But outside of that, let's see what else we do have for now. This Raul Perez, we are actually reviewing this one as well. So we have another Colombian coffee, and then quite a few Colombian coffees on their website right now. Okay, perfect. So they do have a Kenyan coffee and they do have the Karamo. I actually have a sample of this Karamo. I have an extra light sample of this coffee, which I'm going to be trying when it's properly rested. But this Kenyan coffee right here might be a pretty good start, and we'll kind of discuss why that is a little later in the stream. But we'll take a look at that one. I'm wondering if they do have that in the extra light as well. They have the Skelpesa and this hazy IPA, as well as, oh, they still do have the that's an El Placer coffee, right? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So they do have a couple of things that if we do opt to go with September might catch our interest. But let's actually take a look at this Kenyan real quick. So sounds pretty standard, a lot of what you would expect from a Kenyan coffee. I was hoping that they might still have this one in an extra light, but I would still be willing to try the standard version of this coffee as well. But we're going to kind of bookmark this one for right now as one of our potential coffees that we'll include for our coffee of the month. But let's go ahead and move on. Zach said dark roast experimental decaf. And Zach, I can safely say that we are not doing a dark roast experimental decaf this month. We've already done a decaf, and an experimental coffee at some point might be interesting. But I don't even think that there are that many experimental decafs out there yet, with the exception of maybe some of Wilton Benitez's coffees. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So this is an interesting one. So Hervan Rossi said we should do drum roasters. And I actually wanted to pull up Thankfully Coffee's Instagram because they have this very useful tool. Let's make sure that we're signed into. That would be ideal. Okay. Let's make sure that we can pull that up right here. They did a nice list of coffee roasters and what roasting machine they use, and that's going to be very helpful in kind of figuring out which coffee roasters we should take a look at. So it's right here for anybody that's interested. This is Thankfully Coffee, and as you can see right here, they have Loring coffee roaster. So obviously, if we're doing Durham roasters, then we're not doing anything from the Loring. Right here, they have a list of coffee roasters that use the Probat, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see which of these coffee roasters we might be able to use. Instant coffee and Katarina says, "Any Czech coffees on schedule?" Unfortunately not. There are a number of Czech coffees that I actually really want to try. Candy Cane is one, and I think that there's another coffee roaster out in Prague that I'm very interested in trying. But John does say instant coffee. That's something that we could do in the future. We've never done any instant coffee reviews. And once upon a time, there was a company that did exclusively instant coffee, and they worked with some really good coffee roasters. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I actually purchased from them a couple of times, mostly because I wanted to see how good their instant coffee was. Unfortunately, they went out of business, but I think that it's possible for either a very good coffee roaster to corner that instant coffee market or for a business to kind of work with coffee roasters and do that as well. That'd be very interesting. But yeah, let's see which coffee roasters we have on the Probat. We have not done a full bag review of anything from Middle State. I also think that Hydrangia either is changing or has recently changed to the Loring. So Hydrangia seems like it might be not an option at this moment. JBC, that's actually kind of interesting. And I just realized I'm actually not sharing, thankfully, coffees because of the way the tab closed. Let me go ahead and so there we go. Okay. Hi, Alan. Nice to have you on a stream this time around. But yes, right now what we're doing is we're looking at drum roasters since Ravan Rossi suggested we do drum roasters. So here are a list of the Probat-based coffee roasters. Again, this is on Thankfully Coffee's Instagram page. And I think you can scroll over. We also have some Diedrich roasters, some San Franciscan roasters, and then some Gießen roasters. So taking a quick look at this, it did give me an idea on what we might be able to do. But Fathers, I know, has also switched over to Alluring. So they are also not an option at this moment, but we have a handful of San Franciscan roasters. And as of right now, we've kind of bookmarked one Kenyan coffee that we might possibly do. But outside of that, we're still kind of looking at what other things we have. But I'll keep my thoughts on some Probat coffee roasters because we definitely have some options here that we can work with. All right, let's move on. And this is going to be a big one. Chris ZZZ7 says Minmax by BK. So let's and pull up Minmax. I'm actually going to go to Google because I don't like Bing, but it's the default search engine for this. Let's see here. And this is now the third month in a row we've actually discussed Minmax. And I do have a sample of Minmax's Larita Gesha. And I wanted to brew that for this video, but I felt like it probably needed significantly more rest. So I'm going to hold off on that one for either a future stream or maybe just something different in general. But that's definitely something that we should be doing here in the future. What did you get from Substance? Yo, I know Chris, he's goaded. So yeah, wait, Alan, you know Chris? Chris, which Chris do you know? But anyway, what did you get from Substance? I will say this much. I will kind of keep secrets the majority of what I got, but I did get both of their standard offerings, the standard Ethiopian and the standard Kenyan coffee, mostly because I wanted to get a baseline of what their standard offerings are like as well. So those are two coffees. I kind of was deciding on what to do with the higher end offerings, but we did actually get a couple of coffees from Substance as well. And you actually just placed a Minmax order yesterday. Minmax is, oh, I see. Chris, the one that suggested this, but yes, Minmax is a coffee roaster that we've looked at every single month, and I'm gonna see here if they might have something that if we go with Kenyan coffees, then we can definitely do something from Minmax. It'll be interesting to see how they would perform in a poll because I feel like they have a very passionate supporter base right now. So what do we have for roasted coffees? I'm curious if they have this one in both their French roast offering and their Nordic light offering. So they do. They have them in both. So if we're going with Kenyan coffees, this is definitely another Kenyan coffee that we could include. So we will have two right now. And I'll continue to discuss Kenyan coffees a little more once we get into it. But Kenyan coffees does seem like a possible theme this month. All right, let's go ahead and move on for now. And RDIBBZ says Regalia from Queens, New York would be a nice fruity Ethiopian or a nice fruity Ethiopian from somewhere else. We are doing an Ethiopian coffee for last month's coffee of the month. That is it's the one from Bots Coffee. It's eluding me off the top of my head right now, but that one we are going to be doing. But let's take a look at Regalia because we keep going back to Regalia. They just are not winning our coffee of the month polls, unfortunately, like a number of other coffee roasters. But they might have a Kenyan coffee that we could also include. And I have not seen this Costa Rican coffee yet. So this Costa Rican coffee is also an option too. It's a red honey processed Costa Rican coffee. That's interesting. I feel like if we're going to do a Regalia order, then I'm probably going to add this coffee to that order. But let's see what else they have. So they do have a Kenyan coffee. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what Regalia uses as their coffee roaster. Does anybody actually know what Regalia uses as their roasting machine? I'm going to take a look in this tab here. I feel like I knew once upon a time, but since I am not too familiar with Regalia, I can't quite remember what exactly they're using. Yeah, I really don't know actually. But that's another option right now, especially if we're doing Kenyan coffees. Did you get the 2 H&S bags? Alan, which H&S bags are you actually referring to? I'm kinda curious about that because I have quite a few H&S coffees. Actually, since we're on stream, where did I put them? Alright, I thought I had my, H&S coffees. Okay, it looks like they were moved over there, so I could go grab them, but I do have the pizza coffee right next to me, so we do have the pizza coffee coming out. See here. I like to buy Regalia, but I don't know anybody drinking their roasts as of late. Don't feel comfortable going in blind. The September sub for H&S. No, I'm not subbed to H&S. Even though I am having really good results with H&S, I have not picked up anything from their subs. I might, depending on a couple of factors, but since we're reviewing so many other coffees, I think I'm going to try to skip them at least for the time being. But it would be nice to add Regalia to this coffee of the month. We already have 3 potential Kenyan options for right now, and this one definitely seems like one of those. Howard says, decafs and with a little, winky face, and I think I've already said that it's gonna be a bit before we go back to decaf. So we did a decaf coffee of the month earlier this year, and, that did not turn out to be the best. So maybe not for right now, but maybe again, we'll revisit that in the future. Alright, let's see what else we have. So Kevin, VHI says, Kenyan and Costa Rican coffees, and that's why we're looking a lot at Kenyan and Costa Rican coffees because I don't think we've done a Kenyan coffee of the month either in a while or maybe ever. And given that it is Kenyan season, we have a number of Kenyan coffees that we could purchase, including this one from Regalia and then also the Minmax and the September ones. So quite a few options when it comes to Kenyan coffees. And I guess while we're on that subject, why don't we take a quick look at H&S's offerings? Because I can't remember. I don't think that they have a Kenyan coffee right now. And of course, there's my reviews on H&S. Let's see here. Kind of loading a little slow here. There we go. Okay. We have a handful of Colombian coffee. So yeah, I have all of the ones that are in this experimental pack. And then we're also going to be picking up we picked up their mystery coffee. I should say that too. So for the mystery coffee league, I did end up picking up that one. I'm very interested in these Ethiopian coffees. I honestly want to try all of them. But once again, we are reviewing so many H&S coffees that I need to kind of hold off on that for now. Yeah, it does not look like they have a Kenyan coffee right now, unfortunately, because we could have added H&S potentially. And I think what I had as an idea was we could do a coffee from each different roasting machine. So we could pick something from the Stronghold, which would be Minmax's coffee. We could also pick up something from the Loring, which would be September's coffee. And that's why I'm curious as to what Regalia uses, because I can't remember that. And then H&S, I believe, uses the Diedrich. So we have different options right there. All 3 of those would have been different, but it might be beneficial and helpful to find a Diedrich roaster and then a roaster that uses a Probat for Kenyan coffees, because then we have at least one different coffee from each roasting machine. Mate was bots, right? Yes, that's the one. So the Mate Matios, that's the one that we picked up from bots. Cramo and Basha is in this month's sub. Yes, Aviary had Mate as well, but bots had 2 Mates. Do you remember? Um, I know bots had 2. I think they had an initial release with a different one, and then they have the one that we picked as our coffee of the month. So, yes, bots has had a couple of different releases of those coffees. But we're keeping an eye still on Kenyan and Costa Rican coffees for now. And then Gavin says, Sunergos coffee roasters. And I've never heard of this coffee roaster, so let's take a quick look at them. So here, Hydrangia Calendar Coffee has a couple of Kenyan coffees. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Ian. So Calendar's perfect because Calendar I know roasts on the Probat, which would be ideal. So that would give us a third different roasting machine right there. First one Bots had was the white honey, and most recent was the natural. I actually have the Mate Matios now. I'm letting it rest. I don't think it's at day 14 yet. So we do have that one, obviously, for our coffee of the month. But let's take a look at this coffee roaster right here. We'll also take a look at Calendar right after we're done looking at this one. So no Kenyan or Costa Rican coffees that I can see from right here. Tanzanian coffee, these are looks like their foundation. We do have a Costa Rican coffee. It's starting to look like we're probably leaning a little bit more towards Kenyan coffees because a lot of the coffee roasters that were suggested to us are offering Kenyan coffees. But we'll take a quick glance at this Costa Rican coffee. It sounds a lot like a Costa Rican coffee. It's fully washed, and this is a coffee roaster out of Louisville, Kentucky. I've been to Louisville before. It looks like they've been around for quite a while. I can't remember if I actually stopped by their shop if they have one then. I know I stopped by a couple places for coffee in Louisville. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at calendar real quick. And if I remember correctly, I think that Revolver in Vancouver was offering a couple of the calendar coffees. I could have that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they were. All right. And so we have the Danche. Yeah, we have a couple of Kenyan coffees. I know we've reviewed one. I think it's this one that we've actually reviewed. So if that's the case, then this is the one that I would ideally want to review. I'm wondering if any of these Ethiopians are also a natural, because I know that Calendar offered one natural. It is. Wow. I don't know what the shipping from Galway is like, free shipping on 2 bags within Ireland, but if they ship to the United States, then there are a couple of coffees from Calendar that I'd be very interested in. I always wanted to review one of their natural processed coffees since we've yet to review any of those, but I'd probably lean towards this Kenyan coffee right here if we were to add it, but that does give us a third different option. I'm gonna take a very quick look at Revolver's website and see if they might actually be offering it still. And for anybody that doesn't know, Revolver is a multi-roaster out of Vancouver, and they do sell online, so you can purchase a number of their coffees. So they do have this coffee, which would be very helpful. It does not look like they have the natural processed Ethiopian coffee, which is unfortunate. But yeah, sometimes you can get some more difficult to find coffees from them, and I think that they have free shipping with a certain amount. I think it's over 100 US dollars, which is kind of easy to get to when you're purchasing from Revolver and Canadian dollars too, but it does have to be in US dollars, I believe. So yeah, that's definitely an option. Black Fox Coffee has 3 calendars at the moment, one of them being Danche. All right, that might be even better then. Let's take a look. I know Black Fox also started roasting their own, so I'm kind of curious as to what they're offering these days. Probably a couple of their own coffees as well. Yep, so we have a couple of Black Fox's coffees. Has anybody had Black Fox's coffees? I'm curious as to what those might be like. But yes, we have Danche and then this one right here. I assume this is going to be a Colombian coffee. So yeah, it does not look like they have any Kenyan coffees on their website. Never had Black Fox coffee. While we're at it, actually, why don't we take a look at Square Mile? Because Square Mile is still on our suggestions recommendation list, and it's not that expensive to order from them. I've been wanting to order from them for a while. I just have not found anything that I would want. They have a Kenyan coffee. That is interesting. What does Square Mile roast with? I think I want to add this Square Mile coffee to our list. What else do they have right now? They have a. Is this the only single origin coffee that they have right now? They have a Honduran coffee. I would be and an Ethiopian coffee. I would be very happy to purchase from Square Mile. I do wonder how they would do in a poll as well. So we might include Square Mile into our coffee of the month poll. So we're getting some great options right now. Andy Pennard says Minmax by BK. So Minmax right now, I'm telling you, it's really popular. A lot of people really want us to review Minmax, and it would have been great to brew Minmax for this live stream. But unfortunately, once again, it probably takes a while. I didn't check the roast date. I'll need to check in with Jacob to see what the roast date on that coffee is because I'm curious if we could have actually brewed it. But I'm probably going to let it rest still a little longer. All right, let's see what else we have. So next up, we have is that Shutter Bunagar said, "Have you heard of Bluebird Coffee in South Africa? I've only heard of them recently. Super interested to try 'em." Okay, so Airworks actually offered them a couple of months ago, I want to say, and I wasn't interested in the coffee that they were offering at the time, but I did try a sample of the one that they had, and it's Bluebird, right? Yeah. I'd heard a lot about them too. They had an interesting Pepe one, so I was kind of interested in picking up from them. I think a lot of the feedback I'd heard was that maybe they developed a coffee a little more than I usually like, so that was probably the reason I didn't purchase one of their higher end offerings. I was surprised that their coffees were a little bit on the more expensive side of things, and I didn't want to take that risk for the first time. I think I wanted to get a little bit more feedback from people. And what else is interesting is I didn't really hear much from their release either, so let's take a look. They do have a couple of Kenyan coffees. We'll take a look at the comments again real quick. Did you get the Brian Kwan coffee? Actually, Alan, yes, I did. So I purchased that Sidra for anybody that's interested. We are going to be reviewing that one. I'm pretty curious about that coffee as well. Uh, Brian needs to hibernate before brewing. That's very true. Or he can be like Carl, grind his coffee the night before and brew it in the morning. That also was an option. I probably should have done that for this live stream, but you know, we'll see. Maybe in the future on that one. So we do have a couple of Kenyan coffees from Bluebird. I don't know what roasting machine they use either, but this one sounds very nice, actually. I wonder if we're going to have an opportunity to purchase from them again anytime soon. They had a couple of Pepe coffees that were pretty interesting that I wanted to try, but once again, I didn't know if I should purchase from them given just how expensive the coffees were at the time. So yeah, that's an option, but I think we have a couple of good choices for the time being. Let's go ahead and move on to the next comment we have from Tim Vandenberg, and he says, "All Loring roast comparison." So I think it would be interesting to compare a bunch of Kenyan coffees that are roasted. Well, I guess put them in a poll, a bunch of different Loring based coffee roasters. It's a lot easier to find Loring based coffee roasters. We'll go to Thankfully Coffee's list. You can kind of take a look. So, say Tim Wendelbo, it's going to be very easy to find coffees from them. Actually, I'm wondering if Flower Child has a Kenyan coffee. Let's see here. I know Flower Child recently released a handful of coffees, but I think for right now, unless something changes, we're probably going to have that September Kenyan coffee as one of the coffees. This is not Flower Child's website. I probably should put coffee. Okay. And looks like we have a handful of Ethiopian coffees, a Colombian coffee, more Ethiopian coffee. So we do have a Kenyan coffee. And I think if we were to go with all Loring based coffees, then this Kenyan coffee right here would be a good option. That kind of leads to the question as to whether or not Say has anything. And I kind of want to take a quick look at Say's website, mostly because I do know that we had somebody suggest Say. I've already said in the past that we don't want to include Say in our Coffee of the Month polls because they always win our Coffee of the Month polls. Let's see here. So we do have a Kenyan coffee. So if we were to go with that theme, then we could do, say, Flower Child and September for all Kenyan coffees, which they're all pretty popular coffee roasters as well. So that would make for a pretty interesting poll. I also don't think we've had a coffee win the Coffee of the Month poll this year for any of those coffee roasters. The September one did come second place for the decaf. It's kind of interesting that they still have the Esmeralda coffee for sale. I guess it hasn't necessarily sold that well. It is pretty expensive. I wanna try it, but I'm not sure I wanna commit to this price tag on this coffee, mostly because the Latte Lino I had pretty mixed experiences with a couple of years ago. Haven't seen anyone buy Flower Child in a minute. I feel like their offerings haven't been interesting at the moment. Yeah, and I think my issue with Flower Child has been just a little bit of inconsistency. Some of the coffees I've had from them I've enjoyed a lot, but some of them have been a little bit more okay. I think the one I'm thinking of the most was the Juan Pena, which was the most enjoyable one I've ever had from them. But there was the Abel Salinas, which I think probably was my least favorite Abel Salinas from any coffee roaster. The Juan Pena was great though, so they definitely do a good job with some of their coffees. Right, and looks like Carl Ville says, "Any love for Kenyan not roasted light?" So, I think that the Square Mile is the least lightly roasted of the Kenyan coffees that we've looked at this moment. We can look at some other coffee roasters and see. Sweet Bloom, unfortunately, now roasts on the Loring, and I say unfortunately because we already have a handful of Loring coffee roasters. But if they were still roasting on the San Franciscan, then that would give us a fourth different coffee roaster that we could put from our poll or use from poll. We have a Costa Rican coffee right now, and I don't see any Kenyan coffees. I'm very curious as to the way Onyx is roasting right now too, because they've gone through a lot of changes and they might have some Kenyan coffees on their website as well. Let's take a quick look. I don't like navigating their websites. It's a little bit more tricky than it used to be. And a lot of Colombian coffees, a Honduran coffee. They have so many coffees on their website right now, yet no Kenyan coffees. They are also roasting on Deloring too. Deepal in 1992. Any tips for avoiding tomato bomb? Kenyans, big tasting notes will say blackberry for some reason, and all I can taste is V8. Oh, that's a good question. I think the best tip I have for avoiding tomato is purchasing Kenyans from coffee roasters that you have familiarity with, because that's always been the issue is we go in purchasing all of these different Kenyan coffees and then they do end up turning out very tomato, and it's part of, I guess, the risk. There are certain coffee roasters that do a very good job of avoiding the tomato. Sweet Bloom back in the day used to do an excellent job, and that's the Kenyan coffees that I enjoyed the most when I first started drinking coffee because they rarely had that very strong tomato savoriness to them. Let's see here. Alan says, green issue, you can try going coarser and lower temperatures. There are certain coffee roasters specifically. I'm thinking of Cart, where every single Kenyan coffee I've ever had from them has been super tomato forward. I think Tim Wendelbo usually does a decent job with some of their coffees as well. Onyx new site is horrible, especially on mobile. Ugh, yeah, I mean, we have the advertisement for Onyx's website too, so that's kind of tricky. As far as when it goes to brewing the Kenyan coffees, what else is actually kind of interesting about Kenyan coffees is I've always felt that the slightly more developed ones have a little less of that tomato-like taste. They taste a little bit more candied oftentimes. So I actually don't have issues with slightly more developed Kenyan coffees. What causes this? Is it terroir, varietal, or processing? Um, Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I wish I had a little bit more familiarity with what causes that issue. I've heard, like Alan saying, that it is from the actual grain itself. So I really wish I had an answer for that question. So, as far as non-light roasted Kenyan coffees go, there were some options right there. I think we're going with the Kenyan theme. I think that maybe we could pass off Square Mile as being not light because it's not necessarily the lightest, but we are probably going to go with that Square Mile coffee for sure. And then Burnt Truth says, say. Okay, as mentioned, say is a coffee roaster. I really don't like putting in these polls. Say always wins these polls. So maybe not necessarily this time, but we will see. Maybe next year at some point, we'll put Say in a poll. We'll put them in a poll with a bunch of other really good coffee roasters, which actually reminds me, it just dawned on me. This is a brilliant idea. Manhattan has two Kenyan coffees on their website right now, and I know people have had some mixed impressions with Manhattan recently, but I keep saying that I want to revisit them because I think we've only reviewed a couple of their coffees since they have switched over to the Typhoon. But since they used a Typhoon, that is a different coffee roasting machine that we can add to the different roasting machines in this video or in this poll. So they have this Kenyan coffee, which sounds nice, but I believe they have another Kenyan coffee that sounds even better to me. So yeah, we have field blend on this one, but they should have a different Kenyan coffee that I think is in the slightly higher. No, it's in the same offerings, but right here in their exceptional offering, cherry, blackberry, juicy, lemon. So this is the one I would probably go with. It is also a field blend. I might reach out to Manhattan and ask which of the two Kenyan coffees Ben enjoys more because me and Ben actually have very similar preferences when it comes to our Kenyan coffees. So that would potentially give us a different Kenyan coffee option. So what are we looking at right now? Minmax is for sure. I think Square Mile is for sure as well. And then September is a probably. And once again, we have three different roasting machines there. And then we can probably go with something like Manhattan. I still just need to figure out what Square Mile uses as their roasting machine. I always thought it was a drum roaster of some sort, though. And TGZ Time says French. So the only French coffee roasters I know off the top of my head are Kawa, People Possession, and Substance. As mentioned, we're already picking up some Substance coffees, but we'll take a quick look at Kawa's website here. And it's usually pretty easy to get Kawa's coffees as well. There are a lot of multi roasters that offer their coffee. Um, um, Here we go. I've looked at their website before. The very first time we ever tried their coffee, I took a look at their website and I remember them having a lot of coffees and I wanted to purchase from them at the time. I think the shipping was pretty expensive, but let's see here. So we have one of Juan Peña's, looks like papaya coffees. We have another one and just got sidetracked by the Ecuadorian coffees, of course. A handful of Panamanian coffees. They've always had a really good selection of Panamanian coffees. John says maybe do an all say poll. Say can the only way Say can lose a poll is if they're in a poll against all of their other coffees. So that's not a bad idea. So I tread lightly on the usage of terroir because of Lucas Solis. I need to re-listen to the podcast regarding that. I would be happy to listen to that podcast as well. That might give me a better idea of Kenyan coffees. Obviously, the big thing when it comes to Kenyan coffees that I've had my focus on is Coffea Circular's Kenyan Coffee Project, their separation project, because that to me is the most fascinating thing in coffee right now. I might take a look at that. We should probably take a look at Coffea Circular's websites to see what they're offering. But let's finish looking at some of these French coffees. So you would say we'll include the Substance coffee on our coffee of the month poll, but since we're already purchasing it, it's kind of a cop out to include that one in the poll. But once again, for anybody that didn't catch that, we are going to be reviewing Substance's Kenyan coffee, their standard offering. How I didn't actually see any Kenyan coffees. I think this is alphabetical. GK. So yeah, I don't think they have any Kenyan coffees on their website. The other one, People Possession. And if there are any other French coffee roasters that people suggest, then I'd be happy to take a look at them as well. Oh, I forgot that People Possession doesn't really have like a shop that you can purchase from. And let's see here, Guava Banana, Diamante. I don't like their website either. So Douglas says, I'm going to order from Airworks Coffee October drop. They're carrying scenery with the Gichatha AA washed from Kenya. They're also coordinating a group buy of John Small featuring washed Kyangai. Okay, so these scenery coffees. I know I'm going to be taking a much more extensive look at what scenery is offering. I remember I took a look at their list when I first found out that Airworks was going to be carrying them. And the one that caught my eye the most was the washed Brazilian coffee, mostly because it's very rare to find washed Brazilian coffees these days. In addition to that, it might be interesting to grab that Kenyan coffee too, because if if scenery is as good as I've heard from a lot of people, then it would be worth reviewing at least 2 of their coffees, so I will keep that Kenyan coffee in mind. John Small, we recently did review one of their Kenyan coffees. Was it that Kenyan coffee, actually? I think it might have been that Kenyan coffee. So I think we've actually already reviewed that one as well. I could have that wrong, though. We did review a Kenyan coffee from John Small. Right. French, we'll take a look real quick at Substance, and then we'll move on to Café Circular. So once again, for anybody that's on the stream, are there any other French coffee roasters that we might be missing that are a little bit more notable? I know that there have been some French coffee roasters earning a little bit more praise and acclaim recently. So yeah, we do have this Kenyan coffee on the way right now, in theory. So that would have been fun to include in the poll. I think that they use a stronghold as the roaster, so that would kind of contrast Minmax, but Minmax was obviously inspired by Substance, so that's interesting in itself. All right, and we'll take a quick look at Coffea Circular. I know that they do have some Kenyan coffees at all times because of their Kenyan coffee project. I'm not going to include them in the poll. They use the Gießen, which would be something different for this, but I think we're going to stick to the coffees that we have for right now. We haven't included them in a poll in quite a while, but it might be worth doing it in the future. This Riru Wash WX, that's an interesting coffee. They have a lot of coffees on their website right now that I would really like to purchase. And I've mostly restricted myself from purchasing any of their coffees at this moment because we've had so many reviews of them this year. When are you going to visit Ondo Coffee? That would be great, actually. I would really want to purchase some of the stuff that they are going to be carrying. I think that they're going to be offering a bunch of those aviary coffees, so it might be interesting. It might be easier to get it from them than from aviary themselves. All right. Hopefully soon. I'd like to go that's in California, I believe, right? So I'd love to go back down to California sometime here in the near future. Yeah, look at all these Panamanian coffees, but unfortunately, yeah, I'm gonna resist the urge to purchase any of those Kenyan coffees. So Jay Wynn says Bluebeard. Let's take a look at Bluebeard coffee. Bluebeard is based out of Tacoma, and I've been to their coffee shop on multiple occasions. Usually, if I'm in Tacoma, I will take a look at what they're offering and try one of their coffees. But let's see what they do have right now. I really like their shop, actually. Okay. And you can actually find a lot of their coffees in the Seattle area at like markets and stores. So they aren't the lightest roasting coffee roaster out there. They're another coffee roaster that we could include in this poll if we're doing stuff that isn't overly lightly roasted. I don't know what roasting machine that they use, but they do have a Kenyan coffee right here. And I'm guessing that this is probably going to be a field blend. Not a whole lot of notes. Oh, here we go. So now we just have, I, I think this is a misprint. It should be SL34, SL28. But yeah, if I go down to I am planning to go to Tacoma hopefully here soon, so I might just try this coffee on its own if it doesn't actually make it into the poll. But Bluebeard is a coffee roaster that we honestly should. I feel like with a lot of relatively locally based coffee roasters, I've put off reviewing them mostly because it's really easy to pick them up at times. So maybe at some point in the future, they could be included in this coffee of the month poll. I just think we have some really, really good candidates right now for this poll. All right. Ian Ireland 2022 says Lochefoya coffee. Let's take a quick look at them. Alan, I'm not gonna lie, I completely missed what you said about Ondo. I was doing something else. I was just asking, Ondo's based in California, right? Like, I see Ondo talking a lot about their coffee, and I feel like it's relatively local to a lot of people in California. So I feel like that's where I would need to go to visit the coffee shop is down in California, which I would like to because it looks like they carry some really nice coffees in general. So that would be wonderful to visit them. Right. Let's take a look at what they're offering. So this coffee roaster, I'm not going to say too much, but I have a feeling I'm going to be able to acquire their coffee pretty easily here in the near future. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on not just what they have now, but what they're going to be offering in the future. So I probably won't put them in the poll since they are a Loring based coffee roaster. However, I will probably be purchasing some of their coffees here in the near future. This coffee last year was one of my favorite coffees the entire year, by the way, if this is the Larita SL34 Panama. This was a wonderful coffee. It placed pretty high in the best of Panama last year under the non-Gesha category. And I don't think that they were as excited about this year's version, but last year's version of it was absolutely amazing. One of my favorite coffees that we reviewed all of last year. I'm going to take a look at all products. I never really liked the way that their website was laid out, mostly because you have the espresso and then the filter offerings, and it just made things a little tricky when trying to navigate at times. So I don't see any Kenyan coffees. Premium picks right here. I have quite a few of these Larita coffees. Uh, Lamastas. We've reviewed a handful of their higher end offerings already, and even though these are different years, it might be worth revisiting as well. I don't think we reviewed this one. So if we're going to be picking up one higher end coffee coming up, then this is probably going to be the big one that we do pick up. But I'm going to take a quick look at one more thing. I showed this on a previous stream, but for anybody that's not aware, they have this absolutely wonderful list on their website that shows when they are releasing their coffees. Let me see if I can find it again. I always seem to lose it. Some of the coffees that they do have on their way. Here we go. Um, So I'm hoping that maybe they have a Kenyan coffee coming up. So we have some El Salvadorian coffees on the way. This Bangkok Titi, natural processed coffee. And then we have a handful of Panamanian coffees. Looks like all of them have been released. So it looks like for the majority of the coffees that are on the way, they're already released. But for anybody that's ever curious about what Loshify is bringing in, this coffee calendar is one of my favorite coffee calendars. I wish every coffee roaster offered something like this because then you could kind of plan ahead a little bit. Yeah, Ondo is in East Hollywood. Oh, man, when's the last time I was in East Hollywood? I wanna say it wasn't 2020, right? It might have been actually 2020. Yeah, I think I did some really old coffee reviews there at that time. I find pushing those tomato coffees a bit more will help with that. Often their extracting can lead to those savory notes. That's interesting because usually I go the other way, but maybe that's the issue we're having is we're going a little too under on those coffees, and that's kind of leading to a little bit more tomato. Though we haven't had quite as many tomato coffees recently, so I can't tell if that's because we're either getting acclimated to the Kenyan coffees or if it's because coffee roasters have been doing a much better job. I actually don't know where you're based, Julian. You just say Pacific Northwest area, like Seattle area. I actually thought you lived in Cali. Uh, I mean West Coast, so West Coast, best coast. Max says looking for Kenyan. Yes, we are looking for Kenyan coffees because the idea I had based off of a lot of the feedback we've received is to do Kenyan coffees, and my idea was to do a bunch of different Kenyan coffees from different roasting machines. So a little bit of a recap for people that might have joined late from Minmax, because Minmax is extremely popular right now based off of our recommendations. They roast on the Stronghold. September was also suggested to us they roast on the Loring. Square Mile, I can't for the life of me remember what Square Mile roasts on, and I really want to find out what they do. Manhattan roasts on the Typhoon, so Manhattan's also another option, and Calendar roasts on the Probat, so Calendar is also an option. Thank you. I'm new to your channel. Really appreciate what you do. I really appreciate that comment as well. It's really nice anytime we get positive feedback. I've said in the past that there weren't any channels that were doing just purely coffee reviews. And as somebody that is obviously big into coffee, I always wanted there to be a place that you could go and kind of get some feedback and opinion, maybe an idea of the way a coffee or a coffee roaster is. So that's why we started this channel a little bit ago. And I'm grateful for all of the support we've had. Thanks for the tips. Yeah, of course. Happy to provide any tips. And let's move on to what we have next. So, uh, Ian also said Kenyan coffees. So, yeah, Kenyan coffees have been extremely popular this month. And I think what we need to do now is essentially find out what Square Mile roasts on roasting machine. I can send a direct message to James Hoffman and see if he responds. He has hearted some of my comments on his videos in the past. We'll use a Bellwether New Shop roaster. I still, for the longest time, thought that they were. So this is back in 2018 because I remember reading this article because I was always curious as to what Square Mile used, and I think that they had a ProBet back in the day, or they were switching to one. Let's see here. Yeah, ProBet back in the day, or either that or that's what they switched to. And I feel like there was another coffee roaster we were looking at that I wasn't entirely sure what roasting machine they were using either, but yeah, Square Mile is a coffee roaster I definitely want to include. And if they're roasting on a roasting machine that one of the other coffee roasters is using, with the exception of Minmax, I'd be extremely surprised if they were roasting on a Stronghold. But if they were, then I would probably swap them out for that roasting. I would probably swap them out. I still think that they're roasting on the Probat. I might put that question out to anybody that actually knows. If this is the roasting machine that they're using, then I have not actually seen any coffee roaster using it. Is it actually a machine? I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it is. I've seen this. I've seen this at, coffee events before. Now it makes sense. Okay. And I've seen somebody else talk about it. So it looks like they switched from a Probat to this very recently. And again, I can't recall any other coffee roaster I know that's actually used it as its roasting machine. Let's see here. Hydrangia or Tim Wendelboe been suggested, maybe Prodigal since they use an IMF. Oh, that's a good point. There are a handful of coffee roasters that use an IMF. So from what I recall, we still have our Thankfully Coffee list. So we'll go ahead and pull that. The IMF, I know it was Heart, Prodigal, and Doc. Yeah, those were the three big ones. And then Hydrangea actually commented. So hello, Bill. And yes, I saw that you switched to Loring. So I assumed that you had already switched to Loring by now. I said that earlier in the stream, but it's good to know and get the confirmation that you have switched to Loring. I've also heard that you've gone a little lighter as well. So we do need to review some of your coffees here in the future. Let me go back, take a look at what you currently have on your website. Is there anything that you really highly suggest, actually? we didn't take a look at at your coffees this stream. We usually do actually, because there's usually somebody that suggests one of your coffees. Let's take a look. I can't recall whether or not, yeah, there we go. You do have a Kenyan coffee. So it would be between you guys or September for which coffee roaster we would put as our Loring-based coffee roaster in this Coffee of the Month poll. So I might put out a question for that because both of you guys are actually very popular with our base. So that's entirely an option right now. Is Kenyan coffee, but that would still give us two different options for the Loring-based coffee roaster. It's been Loring since 8/15, so it's been relatively new. Yeah, I definitely haven't tried any of your coffees since you've switched to the Loring, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how that turns out. But yeah, for right now, I think still we're probably we have two things to kind of narrow down. So I'm either gonna look for some opinion from you guys, some feedback from you guys, or I'm gonna maybe put out two different polls today to kind of get an idea of which coffee roaster we should go with. So we can go with September or Hydrangia for the Loring-based Kenyan, and then we can go with either Manhattan, which uses a Typhoon for their Kenyan coffees, or we can go with what's the other one? We have Calendar, which uses the Probat for their Kenyan coffee roast for their Kenyan coffees. Get the burrow from Hydrangia. Um, and again, Bill, do you have anything that might be coming out here really soon that's worth checking out? I'm taking a look at your website. I know we haven't tried your version of Luna. It might be fun to revisit Luna. We have not reviewed a Luna Bermudez, I think, since the very first one we had from Manhattan a couple of years ago. And then I've heard really positive things about the Burro coffees, so those might be worth visiting as well. Essentially, if Hydrangia does win that Coffee of the Month poll, we'll definitely pick up a couple of things from them as well. I'm gonna take a quick look at what Hydrangia is also listed on there in case there's any other coffee roasters that I might be interested in taking a quick look at. Yeah, see, that's what I thought. Square Mile is listed on here as using the Probat, but they have switched since this list came out. When did this list come out? February 9th. So it has been a bit. Let's see here. I think there was another coffee roaster I wanted to take a quick look at. I might actually have an opportunity to grab some glitch coffees here in the near future, which would be nice. I was actually thinking that you haven't had any Bermudas in a bit, as I remember. And I think you know what's funny about that, Mac, is I think the last Bermudas I had was the what is it, Samuel? The one that tasted like black licorice? And I'll be completely honest, that one was a little off-putting. I think since then, maybe we've reviewed one other Letty Bermudez, but that was the last one that we had from Manhattan. That was such a strange coffee, and I don't see a lot of places offering that coffee specifically. Outside of that, when I was in Japan, we did have the sake Diego Bermudez coffee, which was very interesting and out there in general. Speaking of interesting and out there coffees, I wonder if anybody knows. So, Chronicle did offer that Hachi coffee from Diego Bermudez, and I'm wondering if anybody else is currently offering it. So it was Prodigal. I opted not to purchase that one. And then I know that Hatch also offered it, but I'm really hoping that there is any other coffee roaster that might bring this coffee in because I really want to try it. I don't care if it's the Gesha, I don't care if it's the Paranima, whatever coffee they have of this one, the Diego Bermudez Hartman project. I really want to try it. So if any coffee roaster has it, then I definitely want to pick that one up. Have you tried any coffees from Workshop or any coffees from Workshop Coffee? I have never tried them, but heard positive feedback about them. They have a Kenyan coffee on their website. We have reviewed one Workshop coffee, though I don't really count that one as a good review because we purchased it from 8 Ounce in Canada a long time ago. And what happened was we received the coffee well past its roast date. So Workshop isn't necessarily the lightest roasting coffee. And I think we got it around the day 50 mark. And I thought it was fine and I thought it was nice, but I think that I would have had a much better impression and idea of them had we received the coffee significantly earlier. We'll take a quick look at their website. I would love to visit more, I guess, review more British coffee roasters. They're not always the easiest to obtain, and It's always kinda tricky getting a good idea of the way that their coffees are beforehand. Workshop is one of them, though. I wish there were maybe some places that would offer more Workshops coffees. What's really interesting about British coffees is not too long ago, the multi-roasters used to carry a lot of these British coffee roasters. They have more recently stopped and switched out for obviously other European and even Asian-based coffee roasters, but it used to be pretty easy to get places like Workshop, Assembly, Square Mile. Now you don't even see them on a lot of multi-roasters websites. This would be a good option. I don't know what, Workshop uses as their roasting machine, though. And oh, that was there's one other roaster I wanted to take a very quick look at. So, we've been really high in Bell Lane recently, and I have kind of glanced at their website here and there. I don't think that they have a Kenyan coffee, but I would love to do Bell Lane. I believe that they roast on the Gießen, which once again is a different roasting machine than what we have so far. I would love to do another full review of them based off of how much I've enjoyed their coffees in the past. So, no Kenyan coffee, it looks like, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye out on that. I might reach out to them too and ask what they're offering here in the near future. Okay, so we have like 10 more minutes or so. We have the coffees mostly sorted out. Again, I'm going to put two polls today to kind of narrow down between Hydrangia and September and Manhattan and Calendar to see which ones you guys would prefer for us to add to that poll. By the way, this Hartume, the coffee from Terraform, I do think it's nice. And we have a couple of Terraform reviews coming up. And based off of what I heard from Jacob, it seems like there were some mixed reactions to Terraform in general. And we'll kind of discuss that in the reviews that we do have for them coming up. I do think that this is probably better than a couple of the coffees that we have. I had some issues with one of them specifically that I'm going to discuss in that review itself. Outside of that, though, it wasn't quite as good, I think, as the first impression that I had from them, though this coffee is pretty solid. I still have Samuel on their website. It's so interesting to me the way that Manhattan has gone with their offerings, because as you can see here, the vast majority of their coffees are a little bit more processed and experimental. And and they're world class. I don't think they have a standard washed offering currently. There we go. There's one. That's even in their competition, so it's not even in their world class offerings. Alan asks, "What's your coffee budget per month?" And that's tricky. I dropped a pretty penny just yesterday. I met up with Jacob and picked up a handful of coffees, and yeah, it was pretty expensive. My coffee budget is pretty high because, as you'd imagine, it's kind of a business expense for all the coffees that we do review on this channel. So I don't think I necessarily have a set budget. Some months it's significantly cheaper because we can purchase a lot of standard offerings. Like when you think about some of the coffee roasters we pick up, they are relatively cheap. And then when we do opt to go with the higher end coffees, then that can end up costing us a lot of money. So I don't think that there's a great answer, but you can probably figure this out if we are reviewing, what is it, four coffees a week, and we'll just say on the safe side, $25. So it's 100, and then we'll go with so yeah, somewhere between 400 to 500, I guess, just for most of the coffees we review, but it's probably actually a fair bit higher than that. Are you going to get Aviary 008? Um, I have been offered a sample. I believe Mac, funny enough, actually offered me a sample of that coffee. So I don't know. Let's take a look at Aviary's website real quick. And let's see here, 008. This one, it's not a washed, correct? Like this one, I know you have to kind of look through here to figure out what the processing is on their coffees, but if anybody knows off the top of their head, I would like to review it, and I'm more inclined or likely to review it if it isn't a wash, but it looks like it is a wash processed coffee. Um, I'd be happy to have a sample of it, and there's a chance I might review it, but we'll kind of see. Mac, got to get those tax write-offs. Yeah, of course. Coffee budget goals. Oh, Alan says it's yeast inoculation processed. So maybe I don't think we've actually reviewed a Basha Bekele, so that would add to the desire to purchase it. If I remember correctly, because we did purchase one coffee, we purchased 006 from Aviary. I don't think that there was any shipping costs on it. So if it's just $32 relative to some of the other coffees that they've had in the past, that's actually not terrible. So I would be inclined to purchase it. I wonder how quickly it's going to sell out. 006 didn't sell out as quick as I expected, but 008 is a coffee that we might actually do. A lot of these from C2C. Let's see. Go all the way to the bottom under the drop downs. Is it actually under there? I could have sworn I checked last time, but let's see here. I don't know if they maybe changed that. Yeah, I just don't see it. They didn't mention the processing real quick. Processing and tasting notes, crop to cup. Oh, okay. Like, zero funk. Interesting. You could probably convince me to purchase this one pretty easily. All right. So just a couple more minutes here. If anybody has any questions or anything else they want us to look at or any other suggestions. Have you ever done a video ranking roasters based off roast profile? Be interesting to learn more about how you define super light roasts, medium roasts, etc. That is an interesting thought, actually. Coffee roasters have been tinkering with our roast profiles quite a bit. So the positive to that is you can kind of maybe take a screenshot as to the roast profiles of coffee roasters at the time. But a lot of people have probably noticed that Say has been kind of developing their coffees a little bit more recently. So I think it won't age well, the video, but at the same time, it might be useful for the time being to kind of get a good idea. Because there are some coffee roasters that are extremely light. That's kind of worth pinpointing as what I identify as that super ultralight sort of spectrum. I remember Lance did that brief piece of information where he was kind of comparing the coffees alongside each other to kind of give you an idea of where they are on that spectrum. And I wish I got that machine as well, because that would be ideal to put in each one of those videos. I think the machine that he used is pretty expensive, but if I could kind of score each coffee based off of what the machine actually says, and that would be very helpful for people to kind of get a good idea, because roast profile is relatively subjective. Like, as people always say, one person's medium is another person's light and vice versa. So I think it would be a very good video to do if we had that opportunity to do so. Hmm, sorry. Hmm. Alan asks, when is 006 review coming? I think it's coming this upcoming week. So we are once again backlogged, and this seems to happen every single month, but I'm hoping that if we finish our backlog this month, then we will be back on schedule. And I think the Aviary 006 coffee is one of the coffees that we should be including this upcoming week in that backlog. Since it's a one-off, we only have the one Aviary coffee, so it's easy to kind of just put and release anywhere. But that should, if I have things correctly and if I understand correctly, should be coming out this week. Yeast inoculated wash for 008. So I think here's the way Aviary is probably going to work with this coffee. It's interesting enough to me. I will probably purchase it. I will. It doesn't sound too much like my coffee, but I will probably purchase it mostly because I do want to get a second impression of Aviary in general. So if I happen to be there when it's released and it doesn't sell out quickly, then I'll probably purchase it. If it does sell out quickly and we don't get a chance, then I will still be open to receiving some samples or just kind of trying it because I do want to get a better idea of this coffee roaster, especially since I've heard extremely positive things about most of their coffees. And I've honestly heard mixed things about the 006. Alright, so here's the way this is gonna work now. After we're done with this video, I'm going to put up both polls for both of those coffees to see which one will be included in our Coffee of the Month poll. And then after that, we will release the poll tomorrow after we get the results from both of the coffees that we're putting in there. It is going to be, of course, the Kenyan coffee from Manhattan and then the one from Calendar, those two for our Probat and Typhoon, and then the September and Hydrangia ones, we will see which of those win. We'll put them in the poll, and then obviously whichever of those coffees wins that poll, then we will go ahead and release that poll, and so on. That'll be our coffee of the month. Timothy says afternoon, so afternoon to you as well, Timothy. Unfortunate that we're going to be ending the stream right here, but yeah, we have our coffees figured out. So I wanted to thank everybody for their contribution, and I'm looking forward to releasing this month. So Kenyan Coffees is the theme. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.